Amigos, amigas, bienvenidos. Be welcome once again to my home here in the beautiful Lima City, capital of this incredible country known nowadays as Peru. But it probably had so many different names before the arrival of the conquistadors. And in this series, we've been able to revisit, to see, or maybe visiting for the first time some of the most incredible societies of the time that we now call the pre-Hispanic time, or that timeline that is so distant to us, but at the same time is so present among us Peruvians because we still coexist with many of the elements that our ancestors inherit us, culturally, in our culinary, in our religion, in the way we see the world. And also, our ancestors, our indigenous ancestors, have lots of messages to share with us, a lot of teachings also for all the humanity. So today, I think this society, the Nazca Society, is going to be very revealing in terms of how, as humans, can eventually depredate also so much our earth that can also take us into a situation in which, well, it will not be reversible, the damage caused to our planet. And you might be wondering, Vanessa, why are you saying this? Well, at the end of this event, you will be able also to be given an answer about, well, this initial question and topic also I have presented. So today we will talk about the Nazca Lines and, well, the messages from the desert also. First of all, well, be welcome. I'm so happy also to see interaction in the chat. As a tour guide also, as a professional tour guide based in my city, Lima, but also well-traveled in the country, I am really happy to see people from all over the world interested in our history. So I've been guiding for many years, since 2006, and I started to do webinars because of, well, the world pandemic, the situation that changed completely our minds, our mindset. In the case of tour guides, also we're trying to see alternative ways to work, and well, virtuality hit me, my family, and it was a really amazing answer, amazing response to a situation in which people couldn't travel to my country. Since then, I completely fell in love for virtual tourism, for history webinars, and so on. So that's why I still do them until now. I really hope you are enjoying this series. If you've been with me since the beginning, we've been revising lots of different societies together. We visited, for example, Caral, the oldest society of the Americas, located not far away from my city, Lima. We also visited Chavin, the Huantar, and the Chavin culture. We were able to go to the north coast of the country and see the discovery of the Lord of Japan. And today, the Nazca Lines. And in this event, we will be able to learn about, well, the lines, but also about all the history before the lines, and even the history before the makers of these lines, the history before the Nazcas, because we cannot understand the Nazca society without talking about their ancestors. Okay, so also we will be able to see some of the most famous images that exist there in the south coast of Peru, and learn also about the theories why these lines exist, why were created for. So we are going to revise all of this together, the symbols, the religion, the traditions, and especially, well, we'll try to understand also life back then in this period of the history of Peru. So now we will begin officially this event, and I think the most important thing before we go to the history is to locate ourselves in the world, locate ourselves also in the location of the society that built the lines. Mm? So, well, this is Peru. You have here two maps, the physical and the also political map of Peru, the official division of the country on the left-hand side by departments. Also, some countries are divided by states or provinces. We are divided by departments, departamentos. You can see, for example, that on the left center, left-hand side of the map of the left, you can see Lima. This is my city, Lima, located inside the department, also named Lima. But we are moving southern. We're going to the department of Ica. Ica department is famous not just because of the lines, also the good wine, the good pisco. A famous destination for adventurous people who want to slide down the desert using not just boogies and also sandboards. So we'll also go in there, let's say virtually, and see some beautiful pictures of that location. But if we move to the picture on the other side of the screen, on the right, you can see the physical map of Peru, a country that is the third largest country in South America, 1.2 million square kilometers, a country divided in coast, Andes, and rainforest. It's also noticeable, it's very clear here from the picture, that the coast is the smallest territory because it's in some sections almost inexistent. If I would basically tell you like the first things, the first important, let's say, revealing information about the coast of Peru is that the norther you go along the coast of Peru, the more rainy it tends to be in certain times of the year, the more humid it tends to be. And the southern you go, the driest it gets. For example, in my city in Lima, in the center of the coast of Peru, rains about 1 cubic centimeter of rain a year. So that's it. 1 cubic centimeter of rain per year. Okay? It's very dry, Lima. But if we go southern, if we go to Nazca, where you can see also that section in the south that is sort of like opening, widening, that coastline that is emerging from the Andes, well, there actually rains even less. It rains, let's say, about 1 cubic, let's say, half of a cubic centimeter. So is per year. It's very, very dry. So now we will continue, and well, here we have the map of the country, like the elevations of the country, seen in a different way, from a different perspective, as if we were just like standing in the level of the soil at the sea level, and we will be able to get like the country was a cake, like just one slice, transversal slice of the country. We will be able to see the elevations, and this is the division invented or created by a Peruvian scientist, Javier Pulgar Vidal, in the 1940s. Different way of seeing the country. He thought that it was necessary not just to see Peru as a country of three regions, coast, Andes, and rainforest. Instead, a country even more diverse. The diversity in Peru is such that nowadays, for example, we say that Peru is one of the most mega diverse countries in the world. 84 of the 103 microclimates that exist in the world are here in this part of the of South America, of the Andes. We're in the central Andes. But Javier Pulgar Vidal decided to divide the country in 8 regions. Okay, and you can see that on the side that looks to the Pacific, on the west side, let's say, of the country, we see 6 regions, starting from the lowest one, the Chala region, basically at the sea level, and ended up in the highest, let's say, even inhabitable location of the country. And yes, we are able to live in the Hancas region. Most of the times, the communities that are up high in that zone of the country are mining communities, cities that live or survive from mining. Well, and then we see on the other side of the Andes, we have two regions, the higher jungle and the lower jungle. For example, in the higher jungle, we have, let's say, realities that are very different to the lower. No? Like, for example, Machu Picchu, no, is on that side, let's say, that location, looking towards the jungle. Okay, so now we go to the section of the country where, well, the story of the Nazca begins. And, well, we are traveling South Lima to the department of Ica. And actually, we're going to talk about the ancestors of the Nazca. As I said before, we can understand the Nazca without talking about their immediate ancestors or their grandfathers, let's say, the Paracas society. Well, Paracas, the Paracas culture, emerged in the desert. They probably came from the northern part of the country, even valleys from the northern part of the country, that due to the aridification of the Peruvian territory, there was a process of aridification that happened basically in the beginnings of Christian era. Many of these people were eventually trapped in certain locations. So we're talking about 2,000 years ago, more or less. So this society, the Paracas society, ended up in this part of the country, a zone that is so beautiful, so magical also. Because when we talk about the desert, we tend to think that, well, the desert, there might be nothing there, just sand dunes and blue sky. Well, no, not really. Paracas is a magical place. It's a place that still is nowadays also visited because of its rich diversity, natural diversity, and also, well, look at the fauna of the desert. Peru is also known or remembered in the history of different countries in Europe, even in North America, from the period of the 19th century, as the biggest exporter in the world of guano. Guano is the poop from sea birds, one of the greatest fertilizers from that period. Still is actually a great fertilizer. And the reason why Peru was a great exporter of this product is because, well, a combination of things. It's so dry there that it almost never rains. And we have such an abundant ocean there. The biggest amount of fishing in the world happens between Chile and Peru due to the Humboldt current. So there's a lot of life in the water, and also seabirds have abundant food. So there is, of course, a lot of pooping in that area. So guano is naturally accumulated in islands. We have islands in that location. So, well, this is the environment that receives those ancient Paracas. Okay, so here you can see the Bay of Paracas, where one of the most important archaeological discoveries took place in the beginnings of the 20th century. So the Bay of Paracas, a desert also, where rain so poorly, naturally preserved bundles that contain mummies from a very ancient, remote period of the history of Peru, that were initially ended up in the wrong hands, in the hands of looters. That's how also archaeologists knew back in that time, that early time in the history of Peruvian archaeology, that there was like wealth in that territory, archaeological wealth, but they didn't know exactly from where this wealth was being taken by looters and sold to the higher bidder internationally. So finally, well, one of the most important Peruvian archaeologists, Julio Cesar Pello, who also partook in lots of discoveries, archaeological discoveries in Peru, he was able to find these bundles, discovering also the wealth that they contain. So this is a picture, for example, from the 1920s, time when the site was investigated, and very little was known really about the time before the Incas. So we are really going back in time, like so deep that there was almost zero understanding of what was like this territory before the Incan society. Which, by the way, if you're interested in learning about the Incas and the discovery of Machu Picchu, our next event and last also of this series will be about the discovery of Machu Picchu. So here you can see, well, the extraction of a bundle, not really very delicately, but that was the best also that, well, people could handle bundles back then. And those bundles were, well, as you know, well, discovered in this region. So the site already was called, the place where these bundles were discovered was named Paracas. So that's why Julio Cesar Pello and Toribio Mejia Cespe, who was his supporter and also co-discoverer of many of the findings in that location, in the Ica location, they decided both to name this new society Paracas. Also, Paracas emerged around the year 700 before Common Era, before Christ era, and continue all the way until the year 200, 20th century. So the Bay of Paracas, a desert also, where rain so poorly, naturally preserves bundles that contain mummies from a very ancient, remote period of the history of Peru, that were initially ended up in the wrong hands, in the hands of looters. That's how also archaeologists knew back in that time, that early time in the history of Peruvian archaeology, that there was like wealth in that territory, archaeological wealth, but they didn't know exactly from where this wealth was being taken by looters and sold to the higher bidder internationally. So finally, well, one of the most important Peruvian archaeologists, Julio Cesar Pello, who also partook in lots of discoveries, archaeological discoveries in Peru, he was able to find these bundles, discovering also the wealth that they contain. So this is a picture, for example, from the 1920s, time when the site was investigated, and very little was known really about the time before the Incas. So we are really going back in time, like so deep that there was almost zero understanding of what was like this territory before the Incan society. Which, by the way, if you're interested in learning about the Incas and the discovery of Machu Picchu, our next event and last also of this series will be about the discovery of Machu Picchu. So here you can see, well, the extraction of a bundle, not really very delicately, but that was the best also that, well, people could handle bundles back then. And those bundles were, well, as you know, well, discovered in this region. So the site already was called, the place where these bundles were discovered was named Paracas. So that's why Julio Cesar Pello and Toribio Mejia Cespe, who was his supporter and also co-discoverer of many of the findings in that location, in the Ica location, they decided both to name this new society Paracas. Also, Paracas emerged around the year 700 before Common Era, before Christ era, and continue all the way until the year 200 of the Common Era or Christian era. Okay, so well, this society was named Paracas for the location. We don't know how they would call themselves. And probably the meaning or the translation into English of the word Paracas is sun rain, or raining sand. What an interesting name. Well, the reason why this name was like given to that location by the ancient people, by the way, Paracas, the translation is into Quechua. It's a translation into the language used by the Incas, or a language that still is in use nowadays, is because there are times in the year when we have storms, or sandstorms, that really cover all the view, so you cannot really see. When you are driving the Pan American highway, you have to be very cautious. So, well, this location was rich in several tombs, burial sites. So, since that particular site was not considered like a place for living or for locating houses, it was more like a necropolis section, like a funerary last destination for the Paracas people. So the Paracas society, also this is the way how the bundles looked like once they were stripped from the layers, like several layers of fabrics that were beautifully decorated. Inside, you could find a person put in fetal embryonic position. This position was forced into the body because, well, to put the body like this flexed, you need to even cut tendons to do that. And the body was also tied very, very strong. So in that way, the position will be held like this permanently. And then after putting the body in such position, the layers of fabrics were put over. Now, according to the status, the more important the person, the more layers of fabric, and they were even more beautiful. So they are more like simple burials, and of course, more fancy, more elegant ones. So we know that there was a process of dehydration of the bodies. So the idea was removing the majority of the moist and humidity from the body, probably putting some type of like sauce that sometimes even depended at some point of the other society. Chavin had a strong religious influence in all the societies. They were not warriors, but they had a group of priests who had a very strong faith and also influence in others, and they own an oracle. So it's possible that at some point these people from the south were able to learn from the gods that had fangs of puma from the Chavin people, and probably representatives of their community traveled to oracles dedicated to that god that the Chavin worship, and well, they brought later with them, they carried with them these symbols, the fangs of puma, or this puma deity, and we know there is an influence of the Chavin in them because before these representations of sea lions, there is another deity that is more ancient, older than this feline god, that its name in Spanish, the Dios Oculado, with big eyes. Oculado refers to the eyes, and usually this deity carries a head It's believed it's a form of trophy head or a knife, so it's sort of like a warrior deity with beautiful headdress. So this god eventually continues present, but is no longer the most important. And this is the reason why most Peruvian kids love this culture in particular. I remember when I was back back in school, like many years ago, like learning because we learn in school about all of the great societies. Since we are very young, we're introduced into our pre-Hispanic history, and I remember that learning about the Paracas and the Nazca, it really changed my life forever. That's the moment when I fell in love for archaeology and history. Like seeing these pictures of people with deformed skulls, and those skulls also being able to see them in museums, and me wondering like how this happened. So now, of course, archaeologists know very well how those deformations happen, and they also know why they happen. Well, it is believed that first of all, the elongated heads, or the long, big heads, were a sign of beauty and as well of power. So to be given a deformation of this kind, well, you have to be chosen, number one, and you have to be a baby, not even a child, a baby to begin with. So these deformations, these elongations, were done by binding the head. And it's a long process that is not harmful to the head. Many societies in the world did that. So, well, this is just to give you an idea. Also, the different possibilities of how to bind the head of a child, and the window, let's say, the gap of time in which someone can be given a deformation of this kind is from the first month after birth until 2 years old. So that is the time, and at 2 years old, well, your skull is already sort of like a hardened, so you cannot change the shape of it. So, well, different ways of binding the head, and also different forms of deformation. This is just a reminder that in different parts of the world, the skull modifications have been also like existent, have been present. For example, this is a picture from a tribe, a woman and her child from a tribe in the Republic of Congo. This is from the beginnings of the 20th century, and when this practice still existed there. So in Peru, of course, since the arrival of the conquistadors, such traditions were completely banned, but we know that in some remote parts of the country continue existing until well into the colonial era. But also another thing interesting about the the Paracas people that eventually continue later with their, say, the Nazcas, which were their descendants, was the medical treatments, advanced medical treatments, and in particular the skull trepanation. So we continue with the skulls, and we, of course, find in museums here in Peru and in the world, like every time there is a museum displaying the Paracas and the Nazca skulls, like these skulls with holes in them. So most people ask me, like, how this was done, Vanessa? This is a typical question when we see those skulls live. Well, the skulls have evidences. First of all, being trepanated, the ones that have holes in them, and also a big percentage of them of a healing process after the trepanation. So this means this person who had the surgery, well, lived for some time after the surgery. So how the surgeries were done? part of the procedure is a mystery, but we know that first of all it was necessary to sedate the patient. And the best way to do that it was like giving them alcohol. Okay, so we have until these days in many parts of the Andes the tradition of drinking different alcoholic beverages made mainly from corn. Okay, so we call this alcoholic drink chicha. Okay, so the chicha, also known as aja, is a fermentation of a juice made from corn. So, well, this person probably was very drunk after drinking lots of chicha under the sun also, and well, probably at some point passed out completely. And that's the moment when medical tools, like for example, obsidian knives, were used to open first the skin and then make incisions, probably with these obsidian knives or some other tools made from metal that was a little bit harder, make incisions in the skull, removing that section of the skull that probably was damaged by consequence of a fight, of the use of clubs also, or because this person had migraines and headaches, consequence of the deformation of the skull itself. It hasn't really been widely studied, not the effects in a person of the deformation of a skull. And also another theory is the initiation into shamanism, into the religious practices, elevated religious practices of the Paracas. So what you can see, for example, in the picture on the left-hand side is a person that evidently has a skull trepanated that was like a circular, almost perfect circular, let's say, trepanation opening, or new bone growing below that trepanated section or that circle. And this is very interesting because bone only grows if someone is alive. Okay, so well, this is the proof that many people survive these surgeries. And by the way, as part of the ending process of these surgeries, well, a plaque of gold was put on the hole. So in that way, the skull and the brain especially will be protected from any exterior situations, anything could hurt or damage the encephalic mass over there, no? Because it was more exposed, more delicately in the surface. Okay, so now we will continue finally with Nazca. I thought that it would be great for you all to understand first, well, what was happening in that territory and how the Nazcas emerge. It's not magically the Nazcas emerge in the desert. And also, we cannot really study one without the other. The societies, they even probably call each other similarly. We don't know. So, circa the beginnings of Christian era, well, we have this society that its belief is an arm of the Paracas, that because probably some Paracas moved away to the Andes, and also some other Paracas migrated southern on the coast, looking as always for better locations, for more fertility, more water, and so on. So they moved into southern territory, into nowadays the Nazca province. And well, this society emerged around the year 100 before Christ, before Common Era, and existed until the year 800 of our era. So Nazca comes from probably two, let's say, words in Quechua. Nanazca, which means land of suffering, so that's a very sad name, and Añasja, which means land of foxes or fox, the land of the fox. Okay, and well, so this period of the history of Peru is known as the regional development time. So it's a time of lots of different societies also appearing. The Moche or Mochicas also emerged parallel also to the Nazcas, but in the north coast. Well, they had a strongest, more direct influence from cultures like, for example, the Chavin. Well, the Nazcas from the south sort of like separated from that influence. They had it in the beginning, and it marked also strongly their religion and their art, but also they developed their own techniques. So, well, the chronicles from the colonial times mention also, this is something really interesting, mention the existence of lines in the South Desert. And the first chronist who mentioned lines in the desert is Pedro Cieza de León. One of the greatest also chronists of the colonial times. He traveled to different places. He even was in Tiahuanaco, in Huari, capital of the Huari Empire. So, well, he was able to see many, many interesting sites. Was the first Spanish Westerner who saw those places. So, well, he saw lines in the desert, and in his chronicles, he mentions that in the south coast there are lines in the desert like ancient trails. Okay? So, but those are many, he said, many. So, well, now of course we know what he was referring to. Okay, but several other archaeologists, professionals in the archaeological world passed over the territory of Nazca. And I think, well, here we have to go straight to the most famous, and this man, Toribio Mejia Cespe, he is the official discoverer of the Nazca Lines. He was the supporter, of course, of the famous father of Peruvian archaeology, Julio César Tello, but we attribute completely the discovery of this site to the scientific world, let's say, in the year 1927. Okay, and well, not many Peruvians really paid attention to this site, and sadly, actually, have to say this. Like most of the archaeological sites that now we Peruvians are so proud of were initially started by foreigners. For example, we have Paul Kosok, who for a long period of time, actually from the mid-30s until the early 50s, he committed to the investigation of the lines. In a time that place also was very deserted, there was no people living there. Now we have a community living quite close to the lines, and this community lives from two activities: tourism and mining. Those are the two activities you can do there in that zone. Gold mining, by the way. So eventually we will see also why this is so important for the story of Nazca. So, well, Paul Kosok, he was an anthropologist, and he came first to Peru, interested in studying different sites, and he fell in love with the Nazca Lines. And he proposed this interesting theory, new theory for that time, that these lines were a gigantic calendar. So, well, he needed a mathematician to prove his theories. He knew the site was very, very old. He even sent some samples, organic samples that he could discover in this place, in the lines, to the United States for doing some carbon-14 tests. So this is the late 40s, early 50s. And he found that indeed this site was from the, let's say, more or less the year 300, 400 of our era. Also, well, this man was able to meet also in his time here in Peru a German lady who is known as, I think, well, the savior of these lines, the person who not just protected these lines, also loved this place uh, like no other, I think. Well, Maria Reich. And Maria Reich, a German from Dresden, she was born far, far away from here and completely fell in love for Peru in general. She came to Peru as tutor, very young actually, as tutor of mathematics and different other courses to a group of children that were children of say important German men or diplomatic men who lived in Cusco. So he asked for a tutor let's say in Germany. He published in a newspaper, and she, with her adventurous heart, decided to travel to the other side of the world. So she knew almost nothing about Peru, but since the moment she came here, well, she decided to stay. She worked for this family for less than a couple of years. Later, the children and the father had to return. This is all in the 1940s. And, well, this, situation allowed her to stay in this country. So she traveled to Lima, back to Lima, and here in Lima is where she finally meets Paul Kosok. So Paul Kosok had a very, very close circle of friends that were scientists and also specialists in social sciences, and he proposed her to come and see the lines. And well, this is the moment when she finally meets those lines. She comes here to Nazca in the at the late of the 1940s, and she actually never left until 1998, when due to her illness she had to be moved to Lima, and shortly after she passed away. She was known, and this is so sad to me saying this, as the crazy lady of the lines, known like this in a demeaning way by the people of Nazca, because they didn't understand it, why someone would be so like into going every morning with her little Volkswagen car to the desert with a broom and with some bags and some different tools for measuring, and with notebooks also to take notes about her findings. She was actually like self-sufficient completely in terms of her expenses. She didn't receive any benefits from the government. She was doing all of this on her own, initially with the help of Mr. Volkosov, then the help of some other friends in the archaeological field, and finally she was left alone. So she defended the theory of Kosok about the calendar. This calendar, probably agricultural and religious calendar, but honestly, at this point, this theory is no longer accepted. Okay, but her work, her publications, what she did for promoting this site, is something that will never be forgotten. Okay, the house she had very close to the lines. Actually, if you look, for example, on Google Maps, Museum Maria Reich, this is a tiny museum that was created in the house that well, some friends helped to build for her close to the Pan American Highway, outside of the city. And she wanted to live the closer she could to the lines so she could take care of them. So and all the furnishing. This is actually what the house had. The furnishing is there, still there. Her maps, everything. Okay, so this webinar is also a tribute to her work. She became Peruvian. She nationalized Peruvian in 1992, so 6 years before her passing. Mhm. Now we go to the lines after paying a little tribute to Maria Reich, and all of the, let's say, dedication or the publications done in German, in English, in Spanish, asking for people from all over the world to come and to help her understand what was this gigantic, say, canvas in which she visualized hundreds of images, but she was not able to see all of the images now we know. Well, when she passed away, there were about 300 of them documented. Now we are close to the 900 images. Mm. And those images are like different kinds of them. We're talking about, for example, lines. So most of the images are just lines, crisscrossing. We have about 70 images of animals. So far we know. But every year there are new ones also added to the list. We have like 150 images of like geometrical images, like triangles and spirals and things of that kind. So it's really huge. The location where these lines is in between the provinces of Nazca, Palpa, Ingenio. So that's in the south. To go from Lima to this location, the only way to do it is by bus. There are some flights, like aircrafts, also that are departing from the city of Ica, but it's not very usual. So what we do when we go with visitors that want to see the lines in person, we have to travel south via Pan American Highway, the South Pan American Highway. So the protected area of the lines is big, actually. And why such a big area is protected? Because remember that there is an active mining activity in that zone. Okay? And most of the mining that happens there is what we call artisanal. Okay? Artisanal, which it's very, very close to actually being illegal. Okay? And the damage that can be caused to the space where lines that haven't been identified yet is such that if we reduce the territory, and there was a project last year to reduce almost half of the size of the, I'm putting in kilometers up there, the territory also. This project is organized by a lobby of like pro-miners or owners of mines, or the leaders of these associations of, let's say, miners, artisanal miners, that know also there is lots of gold in that section. Okay, so going to Nazca, you can go in different forms of buses, touristic buses, public buses, chicken buses. It's really fun. It's a very interesting experience. So it's a long, full day bus ride from Lima to Nazca. Let's say 8 hours basically, if you're going to via a public bus with stops and itinerary. So well, here, I think the most famous of all the lines, this is the hummingbird, one of the longest, most biggest actually lines we have. In a moment, I will explain how the archaeologists believe they were made. But first, I would like to tell you about how big they are. For example, the image, longest actually, is the Alcatraz bird. Okay, so it's a very long, long bird that has the length of 3 American football fields, one next to the other. Just to give you an idea how big they are. Okay, the monkey, one of the biggest in size, also with this element of the spiral, which is always represented in the art of the Nazca. And also notice that the hummingbird, the previous one, and this one, these are creatures of not the desert. They are creatures from the wild, creatures from the jungle. Okay, so how come these Nazca people were making or creating creatures in drawing that were not local from this location? We are going to that also today, I promise. But before, like this tradition of drawing in the soil, drawing or making images in the soil, continue even all the way until the Incas. For example, my friends here present, who were able to go to see Machu Picchu or to see Cusco City, Cusco in particular, tour guides say, Cusco used to look like a puma before the arrival of the conquistadors. And it's true. It's not a legend. The shape of Cusco was the shape of a puma. And you can still see a little bit of the shape of the puma with Sacsayhuaman, the fortress Inca as the head, and the body, the streets also that still exist are part of the body, the bottom, the top. Okay, being the heart of this puma, the main square. Or Machu Picchu, from a perspective, the perspective of the Huayna Picchu looking like a condor. So, and this is the idea basically of replicating what's in the sky, because the perfect duality, according to the pre-Hispanic people, what's in the sky is also replicated here down. Okay? So, I'm just trying to say that this is not something like unusual. That there were societies in the ancient times who were making like drawings, recreating probably deities, and probably also trying to make those cities or buildings look like certain deities as sending some form of message to the gods above in the sky. Okay, so this is the Pan American Highway, my dear friends, and the Pan American Highway was a project that started in the 20s, 30s, 40s, this time when it was consolidated, and I can imagine that also that happened if you come from North America, touring from North America. Also, many archaeological sites were probably damaged by the construction of the Pan American. Here, you can imagine, Peru is a rich land in archaeological sites. Wherever you look at, there is an archaeological site. So here you can see, for example, the lizard drawing cut in two. Can you see the lizard? There is a body of the lizard like on above of the Pan American. You can see the body of the lizard, and on the bottom part you can see the tail of the lizard. Also, that location is where the observation tower, now we have 2 observation towers of the Nazca Lines are located. So one is from the 90s, early 90s. Maria Reis promoted also the creation of that observation tower. And the other one is from the year 2020. And the difference in height is the older one is 12 meters high, and the other one is 20 meters high. So that one, the second one, was promoted by a group of Japanese people, Peruvian Japanese also, and private donations as well, promoted by this cooperative, Peruvian Japanese cooperative. Some of the lines are mysterious also. We saw creatures, animals, and we are seeing here some some intriguing images. We don't know exactly what this image refers to. This image is known usually as the astronaut. It's a humanoid character, and like those human-like representations also have been discovered, more of them actually, in the latest investigation done also by a group of Japanese experts that work in this site since the year 2020 until this year. Actually, they have discovered added hundreds of lines, about 300 lines they have added to the list. Also, but they are more remote. They are even in hillsides. Using also artificial intelligence, they were able to discover those more recently added lines to this list. So we can see that some of the lines also are geometrical. I mentioned already this. Some also remember seeing pictures of these lines, or even seeing them from their flights over the lines with the aircraft. So the cornfield figures of North America. And there are, of course, a lot of different theories about the lines. So today I'm presenting you the scientifically accepted, the archaeologically accepted. But if you're curious about this, also you can also look for lots of very good documentaries related with the alternative explanations as well, which I'm very fascinated about all of them, to be very honest. But well, the scientific explanations really allowed no doubt, at least in understanding that these drawings were made by people with the technologies of the ancient times. You don't need alien technologies to make the lines. And I will explain also this soon. Last but not least, one of the small drawings. And this also helps us to understand two things. First of all, Añasja, the land of the foxes. This is sort of like a fox creature. And also that some of these images are not in the flat. Some of the images are also on slopes. But also, this allows us to see that there are slopes in that desert zone. So there is a possibility that, well, the way how these people were able to observe the lines was from those elevations, from those little slopes that were close to the drawings. Okay, so this is also a possibility. Okay? So first of all, to explain why the lines were made, we need to understand the theories related with like why probably the lines were done like this, gigantic and looking to the pointing to the sky. Maria Rostorovsky, one of the greatest Peruvian historians ever, she investigated lots of chronicles about that location. The exhibitors of idolatries were the ones who, in a way, also helped us understanding what were the beliefs, which were the beliefs of indigenous of different parts of this territory. And, well, there was a god there named Kon. Kon. Okay, Kon was a god that had, well, certain superpowers, actually. Kon was a god that was boneless. And in some also stories, he's described as skinless. He didn't have skin and bones. And he was so lightweighted that, well, the air could take him up over the skies. Kon is also associated with rains and water, and is known as the most important god of that ancient times and the south coast of Peru. Until the arrival of the Incas and the imposition of the god Sun, Inti. Well, Kon also enjoyed very, very much trophy heads. According to these representations, these are from ceramics also. You can see, well, Kon really like trophy heads. So he has an appearance like a cat or fox sometimes, and you can see also representations of these deities there in those potteries that are from Nazca. Nazca potteries are colorful. Some of them have the beautiful hummingbirds, for example. But look at that one, so cute. And we have also well these other very colorful, and also the clothing of the Nazcas, very colorful. Also, it's sort of like they were fighting the desert too, or the sort of like probably monochromous color of the desert sometimes. So well, there you can see a little bit of the art of the Nazca. How the Nazca lines were made. Well, it is no longer a mystery. Actually, it's very simple to make a Nazca line nowadays. You and I, we could go in this moment to Nazca and make a line in less than a day. No? So how? Well, first of all, millions of years ago, the soil of Nazca used to be under the ocean. Okay, there is layers there, different layers of different materials. There is a, let's say, deep layer of sand, like it's very whitish color, like a type of sand, let's say. And on the surface, let's say, or on the top, there is a gravel that is of darker color. So just few centimeters really of this gravel. So what these people did was just removing the superficial layer and exposing the more whitish sediment below. So that's how they did the lines. And because of the natural conditions of the desert, there's no winds blowing in that section. Like there is sort of like a, let's say, a also temperature like so high during daytime there that creates like a cushion of hot air close to the soil that don't allow like any winds to blow that close to the soil. So that's how naturally is protected that section. So you can see also how this drawing made, especially the spiral using lots of wood. Wood posts had to be used to mark the locations, to mark the dimensions also. And well, with lots of tools also, these people were able to make the lines. Why? Well, according to the theory of Prostorovsky, the lines were made for the god Kon to see them from above. Okay, so Kon was supposed to be, flying constantly over the sky, right? And they were making those lines, like those figures, sort of like sending messages to the god. Okay, so this is the theory of Prostorovsky and the people who also agreed with this proposition of the God connected to the Nazca lines. Also, another thing interesting about the lines is the fact that all of the lines that are, let's say, like forms or figures, animal figures, for example, are formed by one line, one consecutive line that defines all the elements in the drawing. And also that line goes around the whole image and ends also parallel to that line. For example, you can see here in the red point, let's locate ourselves in the red point in the bottom of the spider. So if we get inside that line, that initial line next to the red point, we can go around the whole image without, let's say, like cutting at any point our walkway in, and we will exit finally at the blue point line. So why is this interesting? Because it's believed that these Nazca people use these lines as a stage place for dancing. Okay, and they were dancing constantly over the lines in special occasions. Seems also that according to the carbon-14 studies done in the place, to different objects discovered there, that almost at the end of this society, between the years 500 to the very end, 800 of our era, the lines are made bigger and more sophisticated And seems that there is a problem related with the climate in that site. A sort of like a drowned, a process of aridification, more extreme aridification. There are evidences also of Nazca being more green, more like a valley. But all of this process, say, becomes into sort of like a little trap for them, because as they are cutting more trees for making more drawings, also making temples for the gods, they are aridifying more the soil. Also, and this is finally the reason why they have to abandon Nazca and the society comes to an end. But we see a desperation for getting attention from the gods. There are also very interesting sites. Rapidly, I would like to share with you a bit of some mysterious places related with these ancient societies from the south coast of Peru. And these designs also, like for example, Monte Sierpe, which really looks like the skin of a snake. So it's a very, very long drawing or design that is much norther from Nazca, that has all the appearance of of the skin of the snake, and the snake is also associated with water. So I wanted to also mention that many of these lines are also crossed by sort of like trails. These are the trails that Pedro Cieza de Leon saw also, that were probably lines connecting the figures. But this, unfortunately, we don't have any certainty about this. There were also lines that were produced in modern times by cars. So it was definitely necessary at some point, not just to protect this place with a denomination more international, like actually giving the ultimate denomination. And Maria Reich worked, let's say, deeply to be able to obtain that denomination, and finally, she was able to see with her own eyes how this place was protected as a World Heritage in the year 1994. Well, what a great moment for her. So before also we go to the last conclusions related with this society, I would like to tell a bit more about the sophistication of the Nazca. And I mentioned already that they accelerated the process of artification of their cities, of their environment, due to this desire of building more and creating bigger temples, and also asking their gods for provisions and water. There is water in the desert, but of course not in the surface. The water is underground. It's that so-called phreatic table. The Nazcas were able to create aqueducts that still are in use in this moment. There are about 30 of these known until these days, let's say, accesses into the phreatic table that still are also used by the communities there that are into the agriculture. The water is cold, is fresh. The depth of these sort of like passages or channels is the deepest 2 meters. They were all like covered, like walled by rock, with accesses for these Nazca people to clean those like corridors of water to maintain the water cool. The reason why they were all covered is because if they were not, with the sun of Nazca, the water could immediately evaporate. How they knew that this let's say this section had water underground, because it's a phreatic table? Well, they just observed the presence of trees. By observing the presence of the trees, the location of them, like for example the guarango tree in particular, which roots go 40 meters deep. They are amazing trees, they are the only ones able to survive in the desert. They knew that there was water, so they were able to, by following those trees, and they had to also cut the trees to get into that section, and they were able finally to get into the water source. Also, that's how they were able to reach this water. And here you can see, well, a very important site, Kawachi. Kawachi is also nowadays known as the religious center of the Nazca. Please visit Kawachi if you ever visit the Nazca Lines in person. And the investigation of Kawachi, most of what we know about it is thanks to an Italian. So we have Maria Reich, a German, Giuseppe Orefici, Italian, who sadly passed away this year, beginning of this year. He proposed that Kawachi was the roofed temple, while the Nazca Lines were the open temple. Okay? I want you to understand this. The open temple, the ceremonies, probably even at nighttime, happening in the Nazca Lines. We imagine these Nazca people with torches dancing over the lines, and we know for sure they were dancing. I insist in this because they have been done thanks to, well, these technologies with radars, investigation on the soil, on the composition of the soil. And what the specialists were able to find is that in the section where the lines are, the soil is more compact. It's more compact. It's like hundreds of times people have danced over, stepping over several times, compacting, compressing the soil. And when the radar is moved out of the line, the soil is loose. Okay, so this means is sure that these people dance over the lines, and probably at nighttime with torches. And probably at daytime they visited this temple, they worshiped the gods. So, well, this is the theory of Mr. Orefici. Okay, look also this mummy from the Nazca times. This is a female, by the way, and it's believed that she was a priestess, and she has beautiful tattoos, the most beautiful tattoos ever, of sea creatures, of spiders, of snakes. Also, by the way, the ink used for tattooing her body came from octopuses. Okay, so it was an octopus ink, and, well, the needles were cactus needles. So women and men of high status tattooed in the times of the Nazcas. This is a beautiful pottery that shows also the naked body of a female. This is a female with these incredible tattoos. And, well, here, I think this is something you'll find fascinating in this part of this webinar about the Nazcas. You can see that some of the gods, the deities of the Nazcas, the ones they worship, which were marine gods, sea gods, this is the killer whale, have always in their hands heads. Also, these heads are what we refer to as trophy heads. Those are, I think, the most famous Nazca object you're going to find in the world in museums. These killer whales have heads of people who presumably are men, young men, whose, well, appearance first sight looks like they are sleeping. They are not. They are not sleeping. They are like, well, with this sort of like sleepy face, but they have the opening into their body, the mouth closed with thorns. Okay, seal the entrance. So these trophy heads are really like shocking sometimes from the pottery aspect, because these are potteries. Okay, these are potteries of trophy heads. Seems that the potteries also were as sacred as the trophy heads themselves, and they are so like a detail. The Nazcas, they have such an interesting, curious form of representation that is very cartoonesque. Well, many of these trophy heads also are not just like the figure and the ceramic of the head. Also, there are ceramics like pots or sort of like plate like let's say ceramics with heads that are turning into like sort of like some form of foods or roots. In this case, this looks like a root of maybe yucca or something like that. So growing from the head. So this shows that for them, heads were related with fertility, regeneration, and life after this one. Okay, so probably that's the reason why they took heads from other people. And seems that there were some type of like fights, constant fights between different tribes, different groups, different dominant groups that were looking for continuing being in charge of their communities. Maybe even, and this is a very interesting theory also, they were trying to control fertile zones. Okay, so because there were so many Nazcas and there was so few like fertile areas for agriculture that they were constantly fighting. And these ritual fights ended up being like not so ritual because at the end there were people who were sacrificed. So here we continue seeing also these heads, but now I want to show you the actual trophy heads. So trophy heads were done with the, first of all, created with the biggest scale possible. So this was not done like rapidly. There is a whole process of dehydration of the head, remotion of the eyeballs, the tongue, the brain also, an enlargement also of the foramen magnum in the bottom part of the skull, where the spine gets into the skull. So naturally the hole is very small, so it was enlarged, and that's how also all that material was removed, and also a detachment of the skin from the skull. The skull was kept inside. And also a filling in the sections that naturally sort of like retract when someone dies of cotton. So in that way, the head would look very like alive. This is, by the way, a female. This is not a man. This is a female, and this is a very very strange case, unique case of a trophy head that shows a woman. Usually are men. And well, we can see that there's always in the location of the forehead, there's a hole from where a cord comes out. Because the idea of having the trophy heads was not just to like displaying them like in a section, like let's say inside a building. It was probably, and this is theoretically also, hanging from belts, because we see representations of leaders that have these trophy heads hanging from their belts. Isn't this unbelievable? Also, this, for example, image on the left-hand side is a child. This is also a very rare case. The one on the left is a child whose head was turned into a trophy head. But basically, this is like 1% of the cases. The rest are men, adult, young men. So you can see also in the image on the right these thorns that are filling the mouth. So the best collections, I think, of trophy heads are in museums in Nazca. The Antonini Museum in particular, another museum recommendation also for Peru is the Antonini Museum. You can see also that the Nazcas continue with the tradition of the skull deformation or elongation that their ancestors, the Paracas, started thousands of years ago. Okay, so we see also that the deformations are not just long, also wide on the sides, like this skull in the bottom part also. There's another picture, same museum, another picture, even different arrangement of the skulls. Sometimes the skulls are moved and landed also to exhibits, and then also they come back, we return. to this museum. Another close-up to the skulls also that I already mentioned, the child and the lady. Well, this tradition of the trophy heads, it's something that existed in this part of the world, not just in the coast of Peru, but also in other times for other societies even later. But there are societies in the Americas that practice a form of trophy head, let's say, preparation that will continue doing so until the beginnings, actually until the 50s, 1950s, mid 20th century. For example, this is the ethnic group Shuar, also known by the Spanish as the Jíbaro. The Jíbaro. This community still exists, mainly located in the territory of Ecuador. Part of the Shuar community is in Peru, in the north jungle of Peru. And well, this is a big indigenous group spread over that territory that were most famous for shrinking heads of their enemies. Sort of like I'm trying to also give you this idea that this intention of taking the head of the enemy and making it an amulet for good luck was something spread over in this part of the world. And some of these shrinked heads didn't belong to indigenous people of that territory. And this is because there were also many missionaries, Western missionaries, who entered into the jungle in that part of the country, and well, they finally disappeared. And years after, were discovered shrinked heads that had features from these Western peoples, hair color or bearded, also like indigenous people from there don't have beards, etc. So, but I want to also remark the differences between the Nazca tradition and the Jíbaro or Shuar tradition. In the case of the Shuar, for example, there is a removing of the skull, the bone, and just left the skin, basically, like a mask, basically. So by doing this, and also by using different herbs, boiling this herb, and later on boiling this skin, they could reduce the size, shrink, let's say, this mask into a very, very small piece that was even the third of the size of the full head. So that's why most of the time, for example, the eyelashes look longer because the hair doesn't shrink. It's the skin only that shrinks. Okay, so but still you can see also this idea of considering the head powerful, sort of like the center of the vitality. So well, this is a picture of also the back of the let's say the skull of these trophy heads from the Nazca. You can notice the enlargement of the foramen magnum in the back part. Like it's really, really big, like so big that you can scoop out like all of the material inside the skull, and also this hole in the forehead made for like passing across that section like a cord, and also on the pictures on the left, basically how these skulls end up. So for this cord pass inside the skull out, it was necessary to tie on one extreme a small like wooden piece, so in that way the cord will not come out. And also I wanted to give you an idea of the differences between like a normal, a regular foramen magnum, the size, how it is, and how big it usually was enlarged. So, and well, at the end, I would like to give you some reflections related with like the end of the Nazca people. So thousands of years of evolution and adaptation to the desert ended up in a aridification of the site caused by, well, this social structure that just wanted to make things greater and bigger and temples much bigger. And they started to see that water was not enough for them. Cutting the trees was the worst mistake they did, because what happens is that the trees, the warango tree, which is this is the tree, by the way, of the desert. I put the name also below if you want to learn more about the warango. The warango tree, and any tree actually, what it does is keeps the moist, the humidity in the soil. Also, the roots really absorb the water and keep the soil, let's say, humid. But what happens is by cutting these trees, well, there was no agent that could keep the in the soil, and well, that ended up in disaster. So I think if the Nazcas were able to tell us a message, would be like, pay attention to this, pay attention to what you are doing, because there's no escape at the end, and that's what they had to do. They had to move out. Also, once a land that probably even had some type of like fauna that now is gone, like the hummingbirds, or like the monkeys. That probably also shows the monkey the possibility that these people were actively exchanging products with the communities from the jungle, and that's a common thing actually we've done until the arrival of the conquistadors. The societies were traveling societies, merchant societies, that moved from one extreme to the other for products. And vice versa. So ended up like not being able to continue existing here. So they moved away. They migrated. They left. They went to the Andes. And finally, well, this society turned into the Wadi culture. And like this, we're coming to the end of our event. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you so much for your participation. I'm going now to revise questions, but, well, most importantly, thanks for your interest in Peru's history. Muchas gracias.